Hi guys, Totallydubbed here, and today I'm doing a video review on a Roccat Kain 120 Aimo. Now this is a wired gaming mouse that can be found for around £63 in the UK. Links will be down in the description below in case you're interested. Now this mouse is pretty much competitively priced with its competitors, and there are two that I would really want to allude to over here. Is a Logitech G403 and the SteelSeries Rival 310. Two mice of which I've been using quite a lot, and the Kain Aimo 120 Aimo is another one I've been using on a daily driver to kind of compare it and see if I could really transition to it. Now these mices are all comparable because they've all got wired functionalities, they've all got fantastic sensors built in, and even though they differ, they're all really fantastic flawless mice sensors. They've all got the RGB lights and customizable buttons which can be done via their respective softwares. So without further ado, let's get into the review of the Roccat mouse. Now the mouse itself is well built. It's got a non-removable braided cable. Now I would have liked a removable cable ideally, but none of its competitors offer it, so it's no surprise there. The cable itself is relatively thin as well, so it's not going to get easily tangled and it's not going to fray. In terms of the build quality of the mouse itself, as far as that's concerned, I quite like the fact that there's no actual rubber pads. It's kind of got like a non-slip surface, and as you can see, like if I got a little bit of wetness on my hand, it doesn't really show. So even though it would seem like it's a glossy type of thing, it's really more of a matte finish with a sort of anti-fingerprint coating that's been applied to it. Its competitors, such as the Rival 310, have got rubber pads on the side, which means that the rubber pads over time, as you might be able to see, do get dirty and therefore does not look that well. Also, the pads do come off after a little while, which I need to super glue, whereas this doesn't have any of those pads. Now in terms of comfort wise, I had no complaints in terms of that. Yes, it does provide a little bit of a different grip and different feel, but it's not to be discounted that this doesn't have any sort of these rubber pads on the side of it. I actually was very much comfortable using this as a daily driver. Moving on from there, underneath you can see it's got these pads, obviously allowing you to slip and slide on the mouse pad. However, there is no extra pads provided in the box, and there's also no a DPI or profile switch dedicated underneath it either, and there's also no adjustable weights, which is a functionality that you would see in the G403, where you've got adjustable weights, and even though it might be only 10 grams, it is weights that you can adjust. Speaking about weight, this mouse only weighs 89 grams, which to me is kind of the sweet spot when it comes to gaming mice. It's heavy enough for people to be feeling that there's actual mouse there. It's not super lightweight, and yet it's light enough for people who are going to be sniping or using it in FPS games. So for me, 89 grams is the perfect weight, and it's pretty much in correlation with these mice that I've got over here. They all weigh roughly around the same amount. Now other than that, the lights over here can be customized through the software, and I will show you the software. There is certain problems with the software, well, I'll say software limitations, shall I say, where in certain modes you can't independently adjust the RGB lights, whereas in others you can. And again, I will show you that later, but the mouse itself has got two RGB zones, one by the mouse wheel and the other one by the ROCCAT logo. In terms of button placements, it's going to be pretty obvious, but you've got two on the left hand side, one at the top, and then the three standard ones that you've got over there as well. There's no ones on the right hand side, and you can see it's pretty much aimed for right-handed users due to its form factor and also due to its button placement. Now in terms of my hand, it measures around 18.5 centimeters from the top to all the way to the bottom. And as you can see, this mouse actually fits really well for fingertip or palm grip type of play. Very much similar to these two other mice that I talked about before. They've got the same sort of design. This little arch over here means that it's very much comfortable to actually use it in that sort of way. Other than that, let's go into clicking. So I'm going to go quiet now and just go clicking away so you guys can hear how the actual mouse sounds. And I'll also click on the two other mices so you just get to have a little bit of a comparison. So in terms of the clicking sound, you can hear that this one sounds a little bit more dampened in some respect, and the actuation doesn't feel as precise, well, at least to my hands, whereas these ones feel a little bit more accentuated and a little bit more precise sounding. Not to say any of them are less precise than the other, they actually all have mechanical Omron switches inside, which therefore gives you really good sort of clicking sort of nature. I must say, however, out of the three, I did prefer the ROCCAT. It just feels really well precise, and that's because it's got the Titan mechanical switches inside them, as in via Omron as well, so therefore it does really feel really nice. So I must say, in terms of clicking wise, I really did prefer the ROCCAT. Again, that's all subjective, one might prefer the other. Now let's go into the other buttons. So again, I'll go quiet and I'll go into the scroll wheel as well. So let's start with that first. So there we go, that's a little ASMR section of the mouse right there. Now out of the three, again, I prefer the ROCCAT. It just feels a little bit nicer, the buttons are a little bit quieter, and especially that top DPI switch has actually got like a sort of rubbery feel to it. It's kind of hard to show you on camera, but it does feel a little bit nicer, and therefore when I'm pressing it, which I've got assigned to reload, it actually feels quite nice, and it's quite a little bit larger than its competitors. As you can see, in terms of size-wise, it's just easier to press. So in this respect, I actually quite like the buttons and the feel of it. Now, in terms of performance-wise, I must say the ROCCAT does fantastic. It's got the owl eye sensor, which goes up to 16,000 dpi if you're ever going to need that. It's really a flawless sensor. I've come across it before in previous ROCCAT micers. I have no complaints whatsoever coming from the SteelSeries and or the Logitech. Both, all three of them have, as I said before, really nice sensors which enable fantastic one-to-one tracking, great sort of performance across most surfaces. So glass might not be the best, but across most surfaces. And the mouse mat I'm using over here is a soft mouse mat, and I had no problems in terms of tracking in FPS games, or again like browsing Windows or whatever it might be. Other than that, there's no rattle either in terms of the sensor itself, or in terms of the scroll wheel. It doesn't sound anything like that. Some of its competitors in the past have had that, notably the Logitech, which has a little bit of a sound which people did complain about, and also in terms of smashing it down, it doesn't sound like something's going to fall out. It just feels really well built. Also, it should be noted that these two buttons are independent from each other. Some of its competitors, I think Razer, if I'm not mistaken, have a single uniform button, which does mean it can cause problems over time if you're going to be clicking a certain area, whereas this will just have two buttons, so no matter where you click on these buttons, it's going to actuate either left or right. So now, with that out of the way, let's talk about the software, which, as I promised to you, I'm going to talk about. So the software itself is the ROCCAT Swarm software. Apparently, this is not the final version, according to ROCCAT. Well, but anyway, all I can do is tell you what I've got in front of me. Now, in terms of the functionalities of Swarm, I do like it. It's very comprehensive, but it's not as clean looking as its rivals. Logitech and SteelSeries have a really much more clean and nice looking interface. Yet, in this software, you can customize everything to your heart's content, and there's nothing really missing. For example, you can switch between 5 levels of DPI. You can even adjust the Y and X axis of the DPI, which is pretty advanced when it comes down to it. Most people won't use it, but it's nice to actually see it. Button assignments can all be adjusted, as you can see, and with the easy Shift plus button, you can also assign a secondary function per individual button. So you've got 8 buttons in total. Most of these are standard buttons, but like say 6 and 7 and 8. Over here you can assign with a secondary function, which can be really useful for those switching in between games or wanting to perform a certain macro, for example. Illumination, as I mentioned before, as you can see, I can't customize between the two parts over here. If I go, however, in breathing, you're able to see a custom thing over here, and then I can then customize the single the lighting that will happen on the scroll wheel. So certain modes have it, certain modes don't have it. I just would have liked to see it on the wave function and or the intelligent Aimo section. But I can understand why ROCCAT have this, but nevertheless it's just a limitation that I thought to mention. In the advanced settings, as you can see, all the sort of things that you'd normally expect from a certain mouse. And then finally you've got different profiles, up to 5, so you can have 5 different people using it, and you've even got a macro manager to add certain macros that you so wish. So overall, in terms of the ROCCAT mouse, I must say I'm quite impressed. In fact, I would say it's the best gaming mouse I have used to date. In terms of wireless, wired mouse, sorry, it's my favorite. That said, it's very expensive, and for someone who is actually going to be buying a mouse, I would say that you might want to consider its competitors instead. So there we go guys, I've been totally dubbed. Hopefully you enjoyed this review.